Good evening. I am Allie Rosenberg.
And I am Stacy Science.
On behalf of the Newcastle Holocaust and Human Rights Committee and the Newcastle Council on Race and Equity, we welcome you to tonight's rally against hate. Tonight, we feel grateful to so many community members who are taking the time to stand up and take action together.
As we listen to each other's experiences, thoughts, stories, and messages tonight, we stand together against the racist and deadly attacks on the Asian American Pacific Islander community. Tonight, as we stand together, we are a community united in its fight against all hate. Now it is our honor to introduce our student voices, Matthew and Megan Crow.
We want to just start off tonight by saying we can't thank you enough for joining us. My name is, again, Matthew Crow. I'm a senior at Horace Greeley High School.
I'm Megan Crow. I'm a freshman at Horace Greeley High School, and we are members of the Enough Club. The mission of our club, Enough, which stands for Educate Now on Understanding Genocide and Hate, is to empower students to stand up against hate and to develop a community of tolerance through education and the understanding of people's differences.
We want to start tonight by taking a moment of silence to recognize all who have suffered from hate crimes against Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, as well as those who have lost their lives. So we'd like to take a moment of silence right now. So I want to start out by saying that the events that have transpired over the last year, where Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders have been experiencing an increase against hate against their race, is appalling and disgusting. Some stats for you. Reports show that 4,000 hate crimes have been perpetrated against Asians in the past year. 400 of those crimes, or over 400 of those crimes, have been physical assaults. The NYPD reported an 800% increase in Asian hate crimes in 2020. When I see these crimes, I think of my grandmother. She lives here in Chappaqua, and she should be comfortable going out into her community and should not have to fear anything because of her race. We cannot stand for a world like this. We cannot stand idle while innocent people are attacked for day after day. Making a change isn't easy, but there are no other options. Thank you.
But these actions recently brought to light through the media are not new, and these actions are definitely not just because of the coronavirus. Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders have been experiencing discrimination for decades. In 1850, as many Asian people began to migrate to California in hopes of finding gold, California imposed foreign minor taxes. This targeted Asian immigrants, having them pay taxes several times more expensive for mining to discourage immigration to America. In 1882, the U.S. banned immigration from China for 10 years through the Chinese Exclusion Act. In 1930, anti-Filipino and anti-immigration sentiment spread around the U.S., cultivating Watsonville riots in California. In 1940, Japanese Americans were rounded up and sent into internment camps supported by President Roosevelt. These actions driven by hate don't just stop here. It's time for this to change. Thank you for listening. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Councilwoman Lauren Levin.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'd first like to thank the Newcastle CRE Holocaust and Human Rights Committee and the Enough Group for organizing this event. Thank you to all of you for joining us tonight. I must admit, this is a pretty difficult topic for me. When I watched Sandra Oh's speech at the Stop Asian Hate rally, I got really emotional. Her words, "I belong here," kept echoing in my mind. And I think that is one of the fundamental desires in life, is to belong. Born in the Philippines, I became a US citizen when I was 7 and moved around a lot. It was quite difficult for me to settle in any community because I had a sense we would be moving again. My parents were incredibly focused on my education, and so we would always move to the neighborhood with the good schools. We did settle in a central New Jersey town, and it was quite a challenge for me to find friends. I remember the awful times when kids would make fun of me or for being Asian. They'd call me a chink or tell me to move back to my little island. Although it was such a painful experience, I somehow would brush off those comments or laugh or cry at home. Fast forwarding to today and living here in Chappaqua and having a mixed race family, so many things are amazing and better, but elements still remain. In and around this town, I've been mistaken as the host of the sushi restaurant or an employee of the dry cleaner. And please don't mishear me. There's nothing wrong with those jobs, but bias underlying those questions. At a local fundraising event where I was a volunteer bartender, one of the attendees said to me that I could be doing so much better than being a bartender and could pursue a job as a nanny or caretaker, and handed me her card. I was running for town council during that time. Just like during my childhood, my discomfort with these situations has forced me to laugh it off and let it go, but it continues to make me sad and angry. I'm here tonight to tell you all we shouldn't laugh it off and we shouldn't let it go. These small experiences of racism are each one step closer to hate. It's one step closer to creating a paradigm where it's okay to believe these things. It's one step closer to more blatant expressions of racism. It's one step closer to blaming Asians for this pandemic. It's one step closer to that horrific act in Atlanta. We are here tonight to get through our fears, come together as a community to support each other and to stop the hate. And I thank everyone for being here and hope it underlines a sustained desire to understand this and to change things for the better, starting right here in our small idyllic town. It is because of all of you and your collective strength that I feel like I belong here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Levin. I think your message about not laughing it off is one of the most important things that takeaways that anybody could take away from this event. It is now my honor to introduce our County Executive, George Latimer.
Thank you very much, and thank you to this group for organizing this opportunity for us to share our thoughts and to stand up together as a people, whatever our backgrounds are, to stand up against the hatred that's been directed to the Asian American community. And we've seen examples of it all around the country, but it exists everywhere. It exists in our backyard as well. We have a narrative in the United States, and we sometimes forget that we don't live up to that narrative. We're very proud of the narrative when we look back on the document that's in Philadelphia encased our Declaration of Independence, which it says, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and they are endowed by rights by their creator." And we take great pride of the statue that's in the harbor in New York. And on its base, it says, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to be free." This is part of the American narrative of how good and how great we are as a nation. But we don't live up to that standard. And we need to understand what's wrong and what has to be fixed. And we haven't treated those who were here when we arrived from European countries in the days of the original founding of the European powers here in this continent to Native Americans. We did not treat the African American community properly by enslaving them for 250 years with another 100+ years of Jim Crow. We have not been treating immigrants that come from Latin America properly, and we haven't been treating those of the Muslim faith properly. And now we find that once again, we express our anger and our hatred toward a group of people because of the color of their skin or because of whatever ridiculous stereotypes that exist. If we intend to be the country that we want to be, we have to put aside the hatreds and we have to really honor what it is that we say we stand for. And we begin it perhaps in the national dialogue, but we begin it in our backyard with sessions like this, as we did when we were in Ardsley a couple of days ago, to say that this mosaic, this grouping of people, all of whom have different backgrounds, are stronger because of our differences, and that together we form that more perfect union. And we do that by standing up every time there's an act of hatred, and we stand together. Those of us who are Christian, those of us who are Jewish, those of us who are Muslim or Buddhist or have no religious tradition at all, those of us who are old and those of us who are young, those of us who are men and those of us who are women, and those of us who have different gender identification. And we stand in this moment with our Asian brothers and sisters, and we say, you are our brothers and sisters. And the hatred against you is hatred against all of us. And fundamentally, that hatred is un-American.
Thank you so much, County Executive Latimer. Your words and message are so meaningful to our community. I would now like to introduce members of the Newcastle Council on Race and Equity. First, we will hear from Mindy Park.
Hi, hello. Thank you so much for being here. I know we're all tired of Zooms, we're tired of hearing the bad news. So I sincerely do appreciate you taking the time to listen, for wanting to help, wanting to participate, the change that we desperately need. As I started to prepare for tonight, the Colorado shooting happened, and I had to pause. It reminded me that the hate is real and that hate is here. The random attacks on Asians, the Atlanta shooting, it's proof that hate affects all of us. The Atlanta shooting was a shock, especially for me and for Asian communities, is because one of the officials promoted anti-Asian t-shirts merely months ago. It's apparent that the haters are around us. As much as I don't want to admit it or face it, and I want to deny it and shelter my kids from it, the hate exists. The hate transcends all ages, demographics, occupations. We just don't see the hate until we have to see it. I recently attended an online training to help safely diffuse or de-escalate and deal with microaggressions or violence against Asians. Of course, we should diffuse. But how can we fight the silent ones, the quiet discrimination, the quiet dismissal, the quiet prejudice, the quiet hate that never surfaces? I don't want to plant fear in my kids, but that's what I do when I tell my son to be careful. He's only going to pick up some snack down the street. He'll ask, well, be careful of what? That somebody's going to attack him, that someone may spit at him, or someone may accuse him of being a Chinese spy. Because all of the above has happened, whether that's 30 years ago to me or months ago for him. So he says to me, everything is not about race. Perhaps not everything, but I think right now it is. Don't you think? If a 90-year-old man is attacked in front of his house, or elderly lady is punched in her face, isn't it about race? What's unfathomable has happened and is happening, and I'm afraid of what's going to happen. My brothers are 6'4", 200, 250, big guys. I tell them to be careful. And they're like, be careful of what? But they have to be careful for other reasons, different reasons, right? They have to be careful, de-escalate. I tell them not to wear a hoodie. Those of us who's old enough know what that means, not to wear a hoodie. We can disagree on a lot of things, the politics, local, national, school curriculum, workplace issues, whatever that may be. But can we agree that this is about hate? And until we create the necessary change, it will continue to be. We have to stop hate for the unknown, stop hate for the different, stop hate for everything that we think is here to change our status quo, hate everything that's threatening our comfort, however you define it. The next step is to make the change. Let's not react to something that has happened. In our community, changes are happening. The creation of CRE is a clear example. Furthering its work will show our community's commitment to that cause. Creation of a diversity committee at PTA, that's another change. So is having a diversity officer at the district office. I ask myself, what else can we do? Can I welcome a neighbor who looks different, perhaps foreign, who speaks no or limited English? Believe me, I haven't welcomed them even though I look different, I look foreign, and I speak with an accent. I may not overly discriminate, but I do differentiate. I'm from California, and that person, even though I'm Korean, I may not identify with somebody who grew up in Seoul, Korea. Or my husband, who is Korean, but he grew up in Mexico. So I say, I'm not like you. Or so, one of my neighbors was from China. I ask all of us, including myself, not to be fearful or hateful, but let's embrace the differences with empathy. But is that enough? On NPR today, I heard a guest speaker say, GoFundMe and neighbors and friends can help at times such as this, but they can't replace government policies. I think they were discussing childcare at workplace or something like that. But I think same thing applies here. We need structural changes in policies with education and meaningful change. I urge you to think about how anti-Asian and sentiments exist in our daily lives and how we can change that, how we can educate one another about hate and hate crime and to petition the leaders to change, because that's what we can do now and that's what we should do today. Thank you.
Next, we are honored to introduce Bob Chow.
Yes, I'm Bob Chow, a resident of the town of Newcastle since 1991, a volunteer with CRE. I'm also involved with an organization called OCA, Asian American Advocate. I'm with the Westchester and Hudson Valley chapter. And this is a civil rights organization for Asian Americans. It has 50 chapters and affiliates countrywide. Its headquarters is in Washington, D.C. We all know culturally, Asians are taught to study hard, to work hard, and don't make noise. However, since the beginning of COVID-19 pandemic, an organization called Stop AAPI Hate has received reports of more than 3,800 hateful incidents against Asian Americans. Another organization, Center for the Study of Hate and Extremism, reported that in 2020, anti-Asian hate crime surged 145%, while overall hate crimes of our nation dropped 6%. Facing a drastic increase of hateful attacks against us, Asian Americans can no longer stay quiet. You can see many rallies, vigils organized by Asian Americans and supported by many other groups all over the country. We will speak up. We will no longer be silent. I would like to thank the support of our friends in AJC, Anti-Defamation Leagues, and the Holocaust and Human Rights Education Center. They and other groups and friends have come out to support our struggle against anti-Asian American attacks. 2 weeks ago, an elderly Korean woman was attacked in White Plains. Anti-Asian attacks is no longer just a news article you read in the paper. It happens here, right in Westchester. An attack to a group of us is an attack to all of us. Let's all stand together to fight the virus of hate. Thank you. And the next speaker is Eugene Song. He's also a member of CRE.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for being here tonight. I wanted to take a few minutes to talk about names. Names are really interesting. They're a critical and crucial part of our identity. Interestingly enough, we probably actually hear our names spoken to us about, let's say, 100 times more than we actually say them. And so I think names are actually critical in terms of shaping our understanding of the world around us, or more specifically, our understanding of how the world perceives us. For example, I have a really old friend of mine, Jen, and she calls me Huge because that was my nickname in college. And every time I hear her say that, it fills me with sort of warmth and comfort, familiarity. On the other hand, and I'm sure everybody here has either experienced this themselves or knows somebody who has experienced it, there are mean nicknames, nasty nicknames, names that take this critical part of your identity, twist it, and weaponize it against another person. That kind of thing can really hurt. Now, over the weekend, the names of the victims from the Atlanta murders were released. And unfortunately, a lot of the news and media outlets out there didn't quite get it right. They mispronounced names. They misspelled names. They left entire parts of names out. They just butchered them. And this incited a lot of anger and frustration and hurt in the AAPI community and at large, and certainly in myself. And I spent some time trying to reflect as to why. Why was I so upset about this? And I thought about my name and where it came from. Well, it came from my parents, and I started thinking about their names. My dad's name is Kapcho. My mom's name is Hisan. But that's not how they're known. 50 years ago, when they came here, they realized pretty quickly that people aren't really going to be able to say those names. They're not really interested, and so they gave themselves nicknames. They changed that part of their identity, and they now go by Joe and Sonny. Not because that's who they are or what they wanted to be called, but because it was more convenient for everyone else around them. That's probably why they named me Eugene and my brother Christopher, because they didn't want us to have to struggle and to go through that growing up. And it lives on now when I have two beautiful daughters, and my wife is South Asian American. She's Indian American, and when we were thinking about naming our kids, we wanted our kids to have Indian first names. But we didn't just go through and find Indian names that we liked. We actually had to filter them and thought really hard and found names that we thought were almost impossible to mispronounce, because we didn't want them to have to deal with this either. We wanted them to have their heritage reflected in their names, but we had to go through all these extra steps to insulate them. And I thought, why do Asian people? We all understand this. Lots of other immigrants and children of immigrants and people of color to go through this kind of thing all the time. And I thought, why do we go through all these acrobatics with names? And I don't represent the entire Asian community. I can't speak for all Asian people, but for me, it's about wanting to be part of your community. It's about wanting to belong, as was said earlier. The reason why I bring all this up, this recent string of hate crimes and attacks against Asian people, and it's been deeply upsetting and troubling. And for me personally, I need to sit and process these things for a while, and I did. But after that, I need to do something. And I'm hoping that the folks here on this call tonight are also interested in doing something. And so I wanted to leave everybody with some small actionable item. And that is, get people's names right. Take the extra time and the extra effort to learn how to say people's names the way that they should be said. It's less important to know where someone is, quote unquote, really from. It's much more important to know who they are. And a very, very easy step to get there is to just know them, to see them for who they are, to know their stories. Make it clear to them that they are a part of your community and that they belong. And just take that first step by learning their names. Thank you for the time.
Thank you so much to all three of you for sharing your stories and your experiences with the community this evening. It is now my honor to introduce Assembly Member Chris Burdick.
Thank you very much. And, first I want to thank the organizers of this event, Enough, Town of Newcastle Human Rights Commission, and Newcastle Council on Race and Equality. And what we're hearing throughout this evening is that the systemic racism, the prejudice is so deep that we don't go far. It's in our backyard. It's our friends. It's our neighbors. It's in White Plains. It's right here. And I have to thank as well those of you who shared your stories with us, your personal accounts, growing up with systemic racism. Lauren Levin, Mindy Park, Robert Chow, and Eugene Song. And I do think that there's some optimism and ray of hope here. You look down at the bottom of your screen, you'll see that there are 176 participants tonight. That to me is a ray of hope, a ray of light. And, you know, we heard from County Executive Latimer about the narrative that we're all told and we hold dear. And I think that part of our job is to do both the little things and the bigger things. But even the little things may seem little, but they're important. As Eugene Song had mentioned, get the names right. Take the time to understand how they're pronounced. And our job, I think, is to hold dear and to insist that the narrative that we say we believe in is in fact practiced. That's what we're all about. That our diversity is our strength. That's how we move ahead. That's how we embrace one another. How we treat one another with love and peace, understanding, and not tolerance, but it's acceptance. You know, and unfortunately, the previous administration had left a very difficult legacy. The previous administration had given license to saying such things as it's the Chinese virus by seeming to take almost anything and turning it into, as was said before, weaponizing it and striking against others, marginalized people. So our job, I think, is to go forward with hope and with optimism and to do everything we can in our personal lives and politically and socially to try to turn it around and recognize the goodness in every single human being. I want to thank you all again. It's an honor to be with you. And I really, really appreciate the fact that you have brought us all together. It is so important what you're doing. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Assemblymember Burdick, for your powerful message. Now it is my pleasure to introduce ENOUGH's faculty advisor, Mr. Kearns.
Hello, my name is Joe Kearns. I coach the football team at Horace Greeley High School. I teach phys ed, and I am also the proud advisor of the Enough Club. You know, it's funny, my children are refusing to go to bed tonight, a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. And at first I thought that was going to sabotage my little speech here. And as I look at them, I think it's enhanced it, because what if when I looked at my kids, I knew that they were going to be targeted, victims of bias, based on the fact that they were Asian or Black, Jewish, gay, transgender? That would eat me up inside. That would drive me bananas. It's an incredibly powerful thing that we're doing here tonight. It's education. It's ending hate through education so that the next generations can do a better job. I think that we all hope that this next generation of young people puts an end to some of the things that we're watching happening right now. And I certainly hope that my kids grow up in a better world than I did. I think we all hope that. And that's why we're here, because education doesn't just happen in the classroom. It happens through things like what we're doing tonight. Learning that celebrating each other's cultures and each other's differences is fun. I love learning about the Jewish culture or the Asian culture, or you name it. It's fun to learn about that, celebrate it, enjoy it. And I think we're all probably here for the right reasons. So why send the message to the people who are at this Zoom? Because it's our job to educate. I see a lot of young individuals every day. I have an opportunity to educate them. But we all have opportunities to educate humans every day. So yes, we can help. We can make a difference. I went to Greeley, and I'm really proud of the fact that I went to Greeley, but this is one of the reasons why. It's nights like this where a couple of weeks ago, I'm at a meeting for Enough, and Matt and Megan Crow have an idea to step up and have a rally because they notice a situation that is wrong in their community. And 2 weeks later, there's 170 something people at a Zoom, and all kinds of important people talking. And it's, this is one of those nights where I say, wow, our kids are really making a difference. Kudos to everybody in that club. But tonight I wanted to give a special shout out to Matt and Megan. Without further ado, I want to introduce the principal of Horace Greeley, Andrew Corsilia. And before I have him unmute, I just want you to know that I've gotten to know a lot of leaders over my time in education. And you have a leader that on the subject we're talking about tonight is the person that you want leading your school and you want influencing your children. He's a great man. And that is Andrew Corsilia.
Thanks, Joe. I'm flattered, but I don't want to center myself here. I want to, first just really thank Matthew and Megan Crow for inviting me here tonight. I'm honored to be here with everyone. I want you both to know how much you inspire me and inspire all of us. But what I'm here for tonight is to join my voice with you, with our other community members of Chappaqua and the county. I'm here to show up and stand up for Asian American, and Pacific and Islander communities. And I'm here to call attention, as everyone else has tonight, to this rise of bias, racism, and violence against our AAPI community. And as much as noted, a week ago, the Stop AAPI Hate group has named over 3,800 reports, of anti-Asian incidents during the pandemic. And that's a big number, but we know many incidents go unreported. And the real number is certainly much, much higher. It's well documented. It doesn't take long to look at any news source, just in one news source alone with the headlines, the New York Times. Attacks against Asian New Yorkers, what to know. A tense Lunar New Year for the Bay Area after attacks on Asian Americans. How racism and sexism intertwine to torment Asian American women. Attacks on Asian Americans in New York stoke fear, anxiety, and anger. Asian Americans are scared for a reason. And I just pulled those, not even half of the ones that are sitting in one publication in about the last month. And I'm sad that we're sitting here and angry that we're sitting here in this place at the end of a very long and difficult year. I think it's essential to acknowledge that this difficult year, this pandemic, has not affected everyone equally. And I think it's important for me to say, I know our AAPI community has suffered and continues to suffer acts of bias, loss of business, verbal harassment, physical attacks. And we have to recognize and call out, really the backlash and scapegoating that our AAPI communities have endured during the pandemic. And we need to acknowledge that these incidents, they may have increased over the last year, but they're not new at all. And I really appreciate how, Megan, at the beginning of this, you spoke a little bit about the history of Asian American racism towards Asian Americans in the United States. So the question is, like, what could we do, right? We can stand up as we're doing tonight with our AAPI community. We can call out acts of bias and racism, which is not easy for anyone, but it's what is absolutely necessary. We can educate ourselves. We can examine and address our own biases, and we can get involved. So from the school's perspective, as I sit here, I want to tell you that our students in our schools are an opportunity. They're unafraid to speak out. They tell you how it is, and they can be an incredible source of strength. And I think all of us, and I'm going to speak now for our school in particular, it's what we aspire to be. We aspire to be a community that affirms identity. Beyond tolerance, we affirm identity. We aspire to be a community where every member will know when they walk in through our doors every day that they are seen and that they are heard and they are valued. And so I'm also here tonight to recommit and to continue this intentional work of educating ourselves about racism, working to understand our own biases, and valuing each other as individuals. And again, I am just so honored to be here with you tonight, and I want you to know that I stand with you, and so does our school. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Corsilia, for your words and statements. We are pleased to hear a statement from one of the co-chairs of the Chapel Interfaith Council, Rabbi Jaffe.
To my friends in the Newcastle community, and especially those of Asian and Pacific Island descent, on behalf of Temple Bethel, as well as the Chappaqua Interfaith Council, which I co-chair with Reverend Martha Jacobs, we wish to express our deepest condolences and moral outrage at the violence visited upon you, our co-citizens. This Saturday night, we members of the Jewish community will commemorate the story of our liberation from bondage in the story of Passover. We will dip greens in salt water to recall our tears and eat charoset to remind us of the mortar used between bricks. We will eat matzah, the bread of affliction, and say to one another, V'chol dor v'dor chayav adam lerot et atzmo ki'ilu hu haya mitzrayim, meaning in every generation, it is the duty of each of us to consider ourselves as though we personally came forth from Egypt. The idea is to understand and empathize the plight of the vulnerable, commit ourselves to standing for justice and equality for any and all oppressed in our society. Because as the modern prophet Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. famously said, no one is free until we are all free. Egypt is more than just a place, it's a mindset. The Hebrew word for Egypt, Mitzrayim, means from the narrow place. It is this narrowness which feeds the hate, the bigotry, and sadly, violence that has come to light against our Asian and Pacific Islander friends and neighbors. And so it is incumbent upon each of us, in every generation, to stand with you and forthrightly declare this cannot stand. We are better than this. An attack upon one of us is tantamount to an attack upon all of us. Only then, as the biblical vision of a mixed multitude, may we pursue our dream of a promised land. Amen.
Now it is my honor to introduce our town supervisor, Ivy Poole.
So in closing, I want to thank everyone for attending this evening. And a special thank you to all of our guest speakers, our elected officials, County Executive George Latimer, Assemblyman Chris Burdick, and Councilwoman Lauren Levin, the students who spoke this evening, CCSD faculty and administration, Interfaith Council members, and in particular, our friends and neighbors who shared their personal stories with us this evening. To our Asian American and Pacific Islander neighbors and friends, we stand with you. We see you and we love you. You matter to our community. As your town supervisor, you have my full commitment. I will continue to fight to achieve racial and social equity here in Newcastle and beyond our borders. Over the course of the past year, we've taken some terrific strides here in our community. We founded the Holocaust and Human Rights Committee back in 2019. We founded the Council on Race and Equity and published an action plan to achieve racial equity in our community. We sponsored our Police Reform and Reinvention Committee. But we're not about checking boxes. We're not done. This is an ongoing struggle. And it is a struggle. Sometimes it feels like we're taking 2 steps forward and then we're taking one really big step backwards. And I recognize that this work is hard, but we are making progress and we will keep on going. When we come together as a community, as we did here this evening, we're not only able to mourn together, to remember the lives of those who were lost in Atlanta, but also we're here to remind each other that we are a community. We're a community, and we have a shared commitment to a better and a brighter future. And every time we have the opportunity to come together, as we have tonight, I'm reminded of that. And I am strengthened through all of the voices that we have surrounding us. I want to say a special thank you this evening to Matthew and Megan Crow for playing our MCs and for being the genesis for this particular rally. Thank you, as always, to Ali Rosenberg and Stacy Science for helping to organize this event. And thank you to Carrie Krams and everyone at the Newcastle Community Media Center for hosting this event. Thank you.
Thank you, Town Supervisor Poole, for leading our town and creating a more inclusive community here in Newcastle. I just wanted to say before we finish up our rally tonight that our fight and our persistence for change can't stop after this rally ends and this Zoom ends. Go out, support groups that fight against Asian American and Pacific Islander hate crimes. Don't tolerate any type of discrimination. And most importantly, be kind and empathetic to others. That's the only way we can stop hate. And it's not going to be easy, but we have to start now. Now to finish up the evening, we're going to share a video created by Horace Greeley High School student Sydney Posner. We thank you so much for joining us this evening and standing up to hate together.
The reality of anti-Asian American racism. For context, here's some history. The Chinese Exclusion Act kicks off anti-Asian America by saying that Chinese Americans are only laborers, not Americans. Pearl Harbor taught Americans how to be xenophobic. Japanese internment camps created even more stigma that Asian Americans are somehow dangerous. With dropping the atomic bombs in Japan, the government showed its people that violence is apparently the answer. Finally, the Vietnam War created a lie that people who look Asian were the enemy by default. Why did difference become fear? Why did fear become hate? That propaganda became infectious stereotypes still spreading today. The COVID-19 crisis being used as another excuse for racism because it originated in China. Evidently, there has been a surge in hate crime since the pandemic hit. The stigma virus runs through America's veins. No matter our income, my family could not cough up the thorn embedded in our chest, said Kathy Park Hong. There has been a sickness of inadequacy and self-loathing in Asian Americans for far too long. Support local Asian American businesses and stand up to racism. America is strong because of our diversity. Love it.
They're on the front lines of this pandemic trying to save lives. And still, they're forced to live in fear for their lives just walking down streets in America. It's wrong, it's un-American, and it must stop.
Again, thank you so much for attending the rally tonight. It means so much to the two of us, and it means so much to the community. So I just want to thank you all for coming one more time.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Megan.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We got it.